Another thing I wanted to get into today, just still on in the topic of sampling and using Ableton as an audio kind of sound design machine for your music. Somebody commented on the drums earlier in this song. Let's listen to the way the drums change up. Listen closely to the hi-hats and the snare drum. I'm going to solo the drums. And I pulled my kick and snare out of the bus, of course. There you go. Hear the hi-hats and the ride? And the snare drum too. Different snare drums with each hit. Here, let's go ahead and solo those hi-hats quick, guys. And listen to, like, see, I've got one MIDI clip. Look at how simple my MIDI clip is, guys. You know what my least favorite thing is about music production? Staring at notes. It's just boring. You get in there and punch a little beat in, guys. Listen to this hi-hat. It's just going like ticky, 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 ticky. Okay, that's good enough. Because the intrigue of a good piece of music is in the way the sounds change over time. You know this Bob Moog quote? Oftentimes the quality of a piece of electronic music is defined by the way the character of the sounds change over time. I think that's pretty awesome because just hold one chord down and record it for a while. But if the sounds move, this is already going somewhere. So how am I doing that? Check it out. Look at my drum rack. The drum rack has just 5 or 6 pads populated. Let's solo the hi-hat. I'll move the kick out of there real quick. Oh, little buttons. Got it. Listen to that hi-hat articulate. Here's how you do that. I took my one sampler instrument and I put a bunch of hi-hats in there. Not a big deal. And then I went to the velocity zones and I right-clicked on one of the zones and I distributed the ranges equally. Now I have a bunch of hi-hats on one pad and different velocities trigger different sounds. So watch, I'm going to build one of those with you right now real quick. If you're clicking along, this is a really simple workflow, so click with me. Come on, Mr. Rogers, the choo-choo train. Choo-choo. Come on, kids. I'm going to grab a MIDI track. Shift-Command-T. Then I'm going to grab a sampler instrument. S-A-M-P-L, arrow down, enter. Again, that was Command-F to enter my browser and start searching. Now I have the sampler on a MIDI track. Now, let's go up to our drums in our browser. And I'm going to open up drum hits. And then I'm going to open up hi-hats. Now I'm going to, for me, spin the hi-hat roulette wheel because I have 50 trillion sounds in my Ableton. But for you, you just want to scroll down and grab a few. I'm going to just like go down a ways so it's not the same ones as last time I did this. And now I'm just going to say click, shift click till I have a bunch of them selected. Just ham-fistedly, just not even thinking about it. And then I'm going to go ahead and drag that whole pile of hi-hats and put them down in the sampler. It's kind of neat. So now that I've done that, I have the ability to open the zones tab and I can see all my hi-hat sounds in my one sampler instrument. Because you ever hear a real drummer talking about that ride cymbal and the way the ride cymbal is always like subtly articulating? It's like the lead instrument on the drum kit in a way. This is going to help you evoke some of that. Watch these steps closely if you're clicking along. I go to the velocity zones. And I go to one of these red bars. And I right-click on it. And I distribute ranges equally. Now I've got a hi-hat on all those different velocities. And we're almost done setting this up, but there's a couple essential tips here that if I didn't, they're not tips, they're must-do steps. And I used to teach this technique and not show this, and I was terribly mean by not showing this. But go down to the global section of the sampler, and where it says velocity to volume, turn that off. Because you want like a nice compressed hi-hat that's going to be they're all the same volume. You don't want the top of the list ones to be quiet. Let's have them all be nice and loud. And then we're going to take the voice count and put it into 1. So this way, when you're doing a double hit or whatever, they'll cut each other off. It's not just like a big overlapping hi-hat shit pile. Pardon my language. It's tight. Then the last thing I would do, honestly, guys, is I'd pull that sustain level all the way down and put the envelope into trigger mode. This is another thing back from synthesis. Triggering an envelope means that it's like a drum where you're just hitting it. You can't like hold a stick on a hi-hat to sustain it and then let go. That would be weird. So with any sort of impact-based sound, your envelopes want to be in trigger mode. And now this is your global hi-hat, you guys. You know, your amplitude decay for all your hi-hats. So now all I need to do, guys, I'm again going to hit stop all clips. I'm just going to punch in a little loop here. I'll just go with middle C because that's the root note of all hi-hats, or all hi-hats, all sampler instruments. Middle C will play them in their original pitch. And now I'm just going to do a little scribbling. Now I've got a hi-hat that's a little more interesting. My velocity slider is my sound selector. I could fold this, and I could sneak in a couple double hits. Let's do a little double hit. I'm going to click on 1 and say divided by 2, and then Command D. See how these are my hi-hats now? Look at this. That's nice and sexy, little tight guy, and I can go big. You know, and now that I've got that thing all pumped, check this out, you guys. Hold up. Go over to the modulation section, or the MIDI section, pardon me. And now is where you take that velocity and you send it out to global time. Yee! So now I'm even going to make this one backwards. Let's try this out. So then it'll open and close the hi-hat too. Yeah, you can see up here when they play the soft notes, they're short decay. And these ones up here have a longer decay. So like that's already kind of a cool loop, but if I really wanted to make a proper drum beat, I'd make it 2 bars, you know? I'd maybe put a couple rests in there and maybe a couple other little double hits. I'm going to put a double hit here on the end. Remember, when you do the double hit thing, make sure they have different velocities because it'll sound stupid if it's 2 identical hits right next to each other. Yeah. Let's get rid of this downbeat too. Yeah, that's good. Let's try with the kick and snare. Oh, no. See how I use the velocity to influence the overall envelope time? That's just one many cool way to use this technique. I mean, samplers, right? You can't load a bunch of MIDI tracks or MIDI sounds up in here. It's got to be WAV files. So I would recommend playing around with those things. Great sound designers, many of them have said in the past, it all boils down to your workflow with the sampler. As you know, VSTs and MIDI instruments are cool for songwriting and getting the idea down, but ultimately it's going to become audio. And when it comes down to that drum break or that drum fill or how to make that moment in the song really evoke goosebumps, oftentimes it's about resampling and resynthesis. So you got a cool idea, you're going to bake it to audio, then you're going to further chop it. And so get hip to that.